Self-defense or murder? Mother of four, Quenisha Johnson, claims that self-defense is the reason that she shot her boyfriend, DeMonte Smith, to death.
They called me and told me, "Ma'am, do you know a DeMonte Smith?" And my heart dropped. I had to describe my son to this woman. To this man. And I knew at that moment that he was gone. Because, see, a mother's intuition tells you everything.
Imagine the worst argument you've ever had. Now imagine the moment it finally stops. The shouting is gone. The anger is bottled up. The police have been called. They've responded. They've given their warning. And they've finally driven away. The house is cloaked in silence. A silence so thick it's deafening. Broken only by the whimpers of three young children hiding in the next room, scared to death of the grown-up fight they just witnessed. This is a critical pause. This is the moment DeMonte Smith, a 29-year-old father with a life immersed in music and a desperate need for stability, believed the danger had passed. His request was simple, the kind any father makes. He wanted to know where the mother of his children had been all night. He wanted clarity about their co-parenting future. But for Quenisha Johnson, the mother of his youngest child, that simple question wasn't a plea for peace. It was a final, unforgivable offense. It was a demand that tipped her from anger into cold, methodical rage. The body camera footage and the final, agonizing words of DeMonte Smith himself were the evidence. They tell the story of a mother who, just moments after the police left, armed herself with two deadly weapons, a tire iron and a gun, and returned to the home not to defend, but to destroy. Even more shocking is the brazen premeditation. Before the attack, Johnson openly asked the police what would happen if she shot Smith in self-defense, admitting she had already researched the law. This wasn't a sudden burst of fear. This was a calculated attempt to execute a plan for murder. Did she act in the heat of a volatile relationship, or was this calculated elimination of a man who simply wouldn't stop asking about his kids? The jury's verdict of voluntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, and cruelty to children paints a complex and terrifying picture of a truth that will chill you to the bone. Before we uncover the specific, horrific sequence of events, please take 1 second to help us bring these stories of justice to light. If you believe this truth needs to be told, hit that subscribe button right now. Your support is crucial. And while you're there, drop a comment below and tell me, what state or country are you watching from? It's amazing to see how far our true crime family reaches. Stay with me, because the city of Lithonia, Georgia, provides a perfect, tense backdrop for this tragedy. Our focus tightens now on the setting of this family tragedy. Lithonia, Georgia, a smaller, often overlooked city nestled within the massive urban sprawl of DeKalb County, just outside of Atlanta. Lithonia is, in many ways, typical of a southern metro suburb. It's diverse, community-focused, and aspirational. People move here to find a balance, the quiet of suburban life without sacrificing access to the major commerce and culture of Atlanta. But Lithonia, and DeKalb County overall, face the harsh reality of urban proximity. While Atlanta itself sees steep challenges, DeKalb County often reports higher than average violent crime rates compared to the state average. In 2022, DeKalb County reported over 30,000 crimes, solidifying its place as one of the most statistically dangerous counties in Georgia, with a crime rate of over 40 incidents per 1,000 people. This is a community where disputes can carry genuine weight and danger. It's a place where tension simmers beneath the surface of seemingly normal neighborhood life. This environment of underlying stress and volatile community dynamics mirrors perfectly the domestic landscape of DeMonte Smith and Quenisha Johnson. DeMonte Smith, at 29, was a young man with a life in music. He was a rapper, navigating a challenging path to success, a world often marked by high stakes and high pressure. His life was not just about his craft. It was tethered to the 3 young children living in Quenisha Johnson's home, one of whom was his youngest. The relationship between Smith and Johnson was anything but stable. Court records would later reveal a history marked by volatility, domestic tension, and emotional, if not physical, conflict. This was not a healthy co-parenting arrangement. It was a deeply fractured, on-again, off-again war zone that constantly threatened to shatter the fragile peace of the children's lives. On Saturday, November 26, 2022, the volatility reached its peak. Johnson had gone out clubbing with friends, leaving her 3 children under DeMonte Smith's care. He expected her back by 6 a.m. When 6 a.m. came and went, Smith's worry escalated. Johnson's phone was off, a fact that seemed highly suspicious, especially after she called him earlier to say she and her friends had been in a physical fight at the club. Smith was frantic. He started calling family members and even called local hospitals and jails, truly worried for her safety. This single act, his concern and subsequent anger over a prolonged, unaccounted-for absence, was a catalyst that would seal his fate. Around 9 a.m., Johnson finally turned her phone back on, seeing the flood of worried texts from Smith. When she finally spoke to him, his fear had curdled into rage. He was angry about the club fight, angry about her ignoring him, and angry about the precarious situation she had placed his children in. In that tense conference call with family members, Smith reportedly threatened to physically hit Johnson when she returned home. That threat, whether a momentary outburst or genuine danger, was a final match thrown onto the dry kindling of their toxic relationship. It was a justification Johnson needed, or at least the one she would later claim. This entire case hinges on the interpretation of fear versus the reality of calculated action. The defense would later paint DeMonte Smith as a true aggressor, a man with a history of aggressive behavior, claiming Quanisha Johnson acted in pure self-defense against a serial abuser. To a jury, this narrative is compelling, especially in the context of Georgia's stand your ground laws. But the timeline of events that morning shreds that narrative completely. Let's be clear, DeMonte Smith was no saint. The volatility in their relationship was mutual and well documented. But his actions on the morning of November 27th were not those of a man planning an ambush. They were the actions of a father trying to assert his role and ensure accountability. He secured the children. He worried for their mother, and when she finally appeared, his anger was primarily directed at her recklessness. After the angry phone call, Johnson called 911, not seeking immediate protection, but requesting a police escort to her home in Lithonia. She spent 2 hours orchestrating her arrival. When she finally reached her home on Edenberry Lane, DeKalb County police officers were waiting. This detail is crucial. Johnson brought the police to the scene, seemingly to mediate the dispute or provide a shield. Upon arrival, the first thing an officer did was instruct Johnson to place her gun, which she was carrying, back into her car. She complied, but not before assuring the officer that there were no other weapons in the home. This lie, a calculated omission of the tire iron and other potential tools she later retrieved, immediately signals a mindset prepared for confrontation, not peaceful resolution. The argument immediately flared up again outside, in front of the officers. DeMonte Smith came out, and the two began arguing viciously. The officers attempted to mediate the situation, but they reported that Johnson was combative and repeatedly talked over them. The level of tension was so high, the police ultimately decided the best course was to separate them temporarily. They instructed both Smith and Johnson to go inside the house and cool down, planning to circle back in a few minutes to try to mediate the argument again. This is the most pivotal, heart-stopping moment in the entire case. Johnson walked toward the door, passing the officers who were still standing right outside, and she paused. What she said next was not a frightened cry for help. It was an inquiry into legal protection. She stopped and looked the officers in the eye and asked, "What would happen if I shot Smith in self-defense?" She then informed the police that she had already looked up the self-defense laws in Georgia. Let that sink in. With the police standing feet away, she introduced the concept of shooting her child's father under the guise of self-defense. This detail, brought out during the trial, served as the ultimate evidence of premeditation and an intent to manufacture a legal justification for homicide. The police remained on the scene, watching and waiting for the dust to settle, perhaps believing her question was an empty threat meant to intimidate Smith. They were tragically wrong. Inside the house, Smith had clearly reached his limit. Investigators later discovered Smith had called a rideshare service, intending to leave the highly volatile situation just minutes before his scheduled pickup time. He was trying to escape, to de-escalate, to remove himself from the danger. But Quanisha Johnson was already executing her plan. The final descent into chaos was swift and brutal. While the police waited outside, Johnson left the house again, going straight to her car where the officer had instructed her to store her firearm. She didn't just grab the gun, she grabbed the metal tire rod she had failed to mention, too. She returned to the house, armed with 2 weapons, and immediately began to orchestrate her cover-up. She didn't approach DeMonte Smith directly. Instead, she turned to one of her own children, an innocent child caught in the crossfire, and instructed the child to call 911 and lie, telling the dispatcher that DeMonte Smith had hit her. This act of involving her child in a criminal cover-up, forcing them to become an active participant in a lie that would precede the murder, was the basis of the cruelty to children conviction. And then the violence began. It was a vicious 2-stage attack. She didn't use a gun first. She used a tire rod, striking DeMonte Smith in the head with the heavy metal object. He was disabled, stunned, bleeding, and then Quanisha Johnson pulled the trigger. The blast was heard. Over the sound of the gunshot, Johnson could be heard screaming a final, chilling word: "Bye." The sound of the gunshot was not the end. It was the beginning of the most critical piece of evidence against Quanisha Johnson.
Go ahead, man.
Hit me with the left thing first, bro.
Flashing the traffic.
Hurry up,
Did she
hurry up.
shoot you?
Yeah, before I die.
DeMonte Smith, gravely wounded, staggered outside the house. He wasn't running away. He was running toward the safety he knew was right there, the police officers who were waiting for the argument to cool down. They were still on the street, and they watched in horror as a bleeding father of 3 children stumbled toward them, collapsing onto the pavement. The officers immediately activated their body cameras, capturing DeMonte Smith's final, agonizing testament. Before he lost consciousness, DeMonte looked at the officers and delivered his dying declaration, a statement that sealed Quanisha Johnson's fate. "She hit me in the head with a metal thing and then shot me. Hurry before I die." Those words, captured on high-definition video and audio, served as a definitive refutation of any claim of self-defense. Smith was not the aggressor in his final moments. He was a victim of a premeditated, brutal assault. He died on the street, just minutes before the rideshare he had called to escape the situation was scheduled to arrive. The police immediately moved to apprehend Johnson. When questioned at the DeKalb County Police Headquarters, the carefully constructed legal shield she had attempted to build with the police and the 911 call instantly crumbled. When pressed by investigators, Johnson made a stunning admission. DeMonte Smith had not hit her that day. This was the revelation that cemented her guilt. Her entire sequence of actions, the calculated question about self-defense, the retrieval of 2 weapons, the instruction to her child to lie to 911, the use of the tire iron first, and finally, the shot, was exposed as a plan to eliminate her problem and manufacture a legal defense. The children, the true innocent parties in this escalating war, were left terrified and traumatized. They were the key witnesses to the escalating domestic violence, to the gun being put in the car, and tragically, they were witnesses to their mother's violent final act against their father. The trauma inflicted upon them was not abstract. It was a foundation for her conviction on 2 counts of cruelty to children in the 3rd degree. Johnson's defense, despite the overwhelming evidence, was aggressive. Her attorney argued that the police failed to protect Johnson, leaving her no choice but to take matters into her own hands against a serial abuser.
They want you to believe that doesn't matter. They're playing games. Of course it matters. Because it tells you, no, she does not have the intent to do any harm. She just wants to be protected. He says, when the cops leave, I'm going to beat your ass.
Yes,
And do you inform the cops of what he's just said?
immediately.
And what do they do? What's their response?
I asked them, I said, did y'all just hear him? I repeated what he just said. They didn't say, I don't believe they said anything.
And what happens after that?
I asked, continuing to speak as of, okay, so what am I to do in a matter of defending myself? I didn't say, if I shoot him out of self-defense because he keeps putting his hands on me, then am I held accountable?
Right. And while you're standing there, he goes inside and you say, huh? What was that? And then you turn around and say, he just said he's going to beat my ass when y'all leave, or something like that. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay.
They argued that she acted in genuine fear for her life and the lives of her children. But the physical evidence was undeniable. The strike with a tire iron proved intent to harm, not merely to stop an attack. DeMonte Smith's own testimony, his final words, provided the chronological sequence of the attack, demonstrating that Johnson was the aggressor who returned to the scene armed and ready. This is a terrifying reality of domestic violence cases, the complex interplay of threats, fear, and escalation. But in this instance, the facts painted a clear picture of calculated, controlled rage that sought legal justification before the crime was even committed. This is a chilling moment in the investigation, the moment Quanisha Johnson asked the police about the legalities of self-defense before retrieving her weapons. What do you think really motivated her in that split second between the police leaving and her rearming herself? Was it fear, or was it the overwhelming relief that she finally had the chance to remove the man she saw as a threat? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Your input helps us process these incredibly complex events. The trial of Quanisha Nicole Johnson was a tense, emotional battle in the DeKalb County Superior Court, presiding over by Judge Shondiana Morris. The prosecution's case was airtight, relying heavily on the objective, unblinking eyes of technology, the 911 calls, the body camera footage, and the ring camera videos that established the timeline of Johnson's movements. The defense, led by attorney Michael Sterling, fought to humanize Johnson, presenting her as a desperate mother driven to extremes by an abusive partner and failed law enforcement intervention. They argued that the police failure to intervene meant she was forced into a desperate act of self-preservation. But the state, led by the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office, methodically proved that Johnson's actions moved beyond self-defense and into premeditated violence. The prosecutor, Jennifer Scacco, effectively argued that Johnson announced her intentions when she inquired about self-defense laws right in front of the officers. This wasn't an act of a cornered victim. It was an execution of a plan that she had already devised. The jury was tasked with sorting through the emotional weight of a volatile domestic dispute versus the cold reality of the evidence. After hearing all the testimony, including the details of DeMonte Smith's final words, the jury delivered its verdict on August 25, 2023.
So, Ms. Johnson, I will sentence you as follows. As to voluntary manslaughter, I will sentence you to 20 years to serve 10 years in confinement. The first 5 years of those 10 years to be served in prison, and the remaining 5 years to be served as home confinement. The remaining 10 years of the 20-year sentence will be served on probation. Special conditions of the 5 years of home confinement is that you must be fully employed. You can only leave your house for work, medical appointments, school, and for minor children, school appointments, minor children's therapy appointments, and minor children's school-sponsored activities. The hours of your work, school, and medical are only to be between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., and there is to be no one at your home at any time during the duration of your sentence who has a felony conviction. As to count 3, the aggravated assault, it will merge into count 2, voluntary manslaughter by operation of law. As to count 4, aggravated assault, I will sentence you to 10 years to serve, to run concurrent with count 2.
The jury found Quanisha Johnson not guilty of the most severe charge, malice murder, which requires deliberate, pre-planned evil intent. However, they found her guilty of several counts that captured the lethal nature and context of her actions. Voluntary manslaughter, 2 counts of aggravated assault, family violence, 2 counts of cruelty to children in the 3rd degree, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The conviction of voluntary manslaughter is highly significant. It signals a jury accepted that the killing occurred in a sudden, violent, and irresistible passion, effectively acknowledging the overwhelming, heated nature of the domestic dispute.
It still makes me feel the same way. I never wanted it to happen. I didn't intend for it to happen. I didn't mean for it to happen.
But in that moment, you felt like you had to defend yourself.
I did.
No further questions, Grandma.
However, by convicting her of aggravated assault and cruelty to children, they definitively rejected her claim of a pure, justified act of self-defense. Her decision to arm herself with 2 weapons, strike him with a tire iron first, and involve her children in the cover-up were all deemed criminal acts. The sentencing phase was equally contentious. The state requested a significant sentence of 25 years in prison. The defense argued for leniency, citing the history of domestic turbulence. Ultimately, Judge Shondiana Morris delivered a complex sentence under the First Offender Act. Johnson was sentenced to 20 years in total, broken down into 10 years of confinement, 5 years in prison followed by 5 years under house arrest, and 10 years of probation. The fact that the judge sentenced Johnson under the First Offender Act and granted her an appeal bond over the state's objection further complicated the immediate outcome, meaning Johnson was allowed to remain out of immediate custody, pending her appeal. This decision sparked massive controversy, with the community and the victim's family arguing that it did not adequately reflect the brutality of the crime.
And then the detective called me, and my first words was, "Where is she?" They said, "Who? Where is the woman that killed my son?" Because I knew it was you. A darkness dwelled inside of you. You took his life and said bye. You showed no remorse for him. None. Not for me, not for my daughter, not for his kids. I can't believe that I felt sorry for you for a moment. But I didn't know all the facts. I didn't know everything. I have no remorse for you. I have no empathy because you had no remorse for my son and you showed no empathy for him. You deserve every single year they can give to you.
Regardless of the complex sentencing, the conviction stands as a powerful legal statement. In a domestic dispute, deliberately manufacturing a crime scene, arming oneself, and involving children to create a false narrative of self-defense is a crime. DeMonte Smith, the father who merely wanted to discuss his children, was silenced forever, but his final, desperate words secured the verdict that would eventually send his killer to prison. The case of DeMonte Smith and Quanisha Johnson is not just a sensational headline. It is a profound lesson etched in the legal transcripts of DeKalb County. The tragedy here is the ultimate failure to prioritize the one thing that mattered most, the children. This case warns us all about the razor-thin line between legitimate fear and calculated escalation. If a relationship is truly volatile, if threats have been exchanged, and if law enforcement has become a frequent visitor, the time for mediation is over. The only safe and legal option is to secure formal separation, use the court system for custody and support, and utilize protective orders. Johnson's failure to do so, her decision to take justice into her own hands while teaching her children a devastating lesson in violence, is what led to a criminal conviction. The greatest crime was a trauma inflicted on 3 young lives, who lost their father to a violent end and their mother to a jail cell, all because of a vicious co-parenting dispute. If this deep dive into the complex facts of this case provided you with insight into the justice system and the real dangers of domestic violence, please give this video a like and share it with others who appreciate detailed, factual true crime analysis. We'll keep working to ensure these stories are told. Thank you for watching and for supporting the search for truth. Until the next case, take care